Hello, everyone. This is Gary Gomes. I'm coming to you from New Bedford, Massachusetts. I'm a Vedic astrologer of roughly 34, close to 35 years experience. And I'm going to talk about this week. I'm going to focus on the presidential candidates in the United States. I'll also talk about the the debate last week, and also try to analyze the charts from a non-political perspective. So this will be equally fair and harsh to both candidates. One of the reasons I want to do it this way, I'm going to include the other things I normally include in discussions, like an analysis of the week, and also the uh, individual charts, and also what's happening around the world. But I just thought this was kind of a pivotal point in the election cycle. Now, again, we have had what I would call poor debate performances, which have not been quite so consequential. So Barack Obama's first debate against Mitt Romney was not really a very successful debate on Obama's part, and he was able to recover from that. I think the problem with Biden is that essentially, although this was also true of Trump in 2016, people were asking him to get out of the race in 2016 when some of the scandals came up right before the election. So there's nothing which is written in stone about how candidates, whether or not candidates stay or leave, sometimes it's just based around the stubbornness. And we have two very stubborn individuals here in both candidates, both major candidates. So let's look at the actual charts. All right, so we're going to start with the incumbent president. By the way, if you want to contact me for an individual reading or for lessons, please don't hesitate to contact me. My phone number is 508-525-0001. And my email is Gary Gomes G. That's the letter G at Comcast. At gmail.com. So again, that's Gary Gomes G at gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on a variety of social media sites. But the most direct way to get me is through phone. And you can text me at that number too, 508-525-0001. So let's see if we can pull up the current president's chart. And it looks like it worked. And I included something a little bit spicy in here as well, or a little bit novel in here as well. I'm doing what are called planetary averages. Now, planetary averages are part of the Gemini system of astrology, and they can indicate, essentially perceptions or images that people have of the individual. Now, we normally look at aridas from signs. Okay, so this is sort of a different flavor. This is directly affecting the planetary placements. And you can see by President Biden's chart, he has this very, very interesting Sun-Venus conjunction in his birth chart. Venus is combust, so that means this weekend the houses, the rules are weakened. So that's the seventh house. He also has Saturn located retrograde in the seventh house, so he lost his first wife. As a matter of fact, it was a bit of a tragedy. He was elected senator, and before he could take office, his wife and daughter died in an auto accident. The other thing is, Joe's chart does have an exalted Jupiter. It's retrograde. So that, again, retrogrades mean multiple starts. That's really what they mean to me. And they'll be a little bit twisted and a little bit controversial. So essentially, Saturn retrograde aspecting Jupiter retrograde, it'll give him a delay in luck. It'll give him some problems with his kids. So he lost one child. He had actually he lost two children. Bo, his older son, passed away, and of course we all know what's going on with the younger boy, with Hunter right now. And Hunter has had a court case, in a court case. He was just found guilty. We'll talk about Trump's legal issues too. And I'm trying to squeeze a lot into a very small part of time, but a very small segment of time. But over here, we have this interesting thing in that he has Saturn with his birth K2 and also along with the sun. So that K2 sun combination can make it very easy for him to be toppled from positions. Okay, so things can be stolen from him relatively easy, or that's the perception. If you look back to 1988, he was running for president. That was the year that Governor Dukakis won the nomination. And for those of you old enough to remember, and Joe was essentially was thrown out of the competition because they had found out he had plagiarized one of his papers, and the Dukakis campaign wasn't shy about publicizing that. And he resigned. He also had an aneurysm after that. He had a couple of aneurysms after that. So it was really not a lucky year for him. That's also, I think that's significant because if you go back to Chinese astrology, I believe that's a dragon year. And this is a dragon year too. Let me think for a second. 36. Yeah. Yeah, it was a year of the dragon. So again, not all dragon years are the same, but this is kind of an important year for Joe. And dragon years are interesting because it isn't because Joe was born in the was he born in the year that no, he wasn't. He wasn't born in the year of the dragon, 1942. Yeah. He was born 2 years after. So I think year of the dragon can indicate disruption or turmoil or it's not necessarily lucky for it's considered an auspicious year in order for a child to be born because it gives a great deal of power, but it's a rather difficult. There's a lot of drama connected with the dragon, but even with that, we have Ketu involved with his fourth house and the moon, and one of the representatives of the moon, and we have a representative of Ketu connected with the moon sign over here. That's his ninth lord, which actually has to do with luck and status. And we also have Jupiter moon conjunction over here. So this Jupiter will help him out a great deal in terms of public perception. It shows Aratus in the first house. But I think one of the things also that we have to keep in mind with about Joe is that he's in a Saturn major planetary period. Saturn major planetary periods cause slowdowns. He just ended his Rahu major planetary period. Saturn, by its nature, tends to slow down mental faculty. It's just what it does. It's not really. It slows you down. It makes you a bit more timid. I can speak from personal experience in terms of I became, after being very gregarious and outgoing during my Jupiter Mahadasha, my Saturn Mahadasha, I became very um, quiet, soft-spoken. It was a good year for me. It was a good period for me work-wise, but I had it when I was in my 20s. And Joe's having it when he's old. Okay. So it seems to be an appropriate time to have an older Mahadasha, but it also slows people down. You know, I'm not trying to attack him. I'm just saying this is what I've seen from astrology charts. People in Saturn Mahadashas, and this is in the seventh house, which is a house connected with death or with the cessation of things, is not a good sign. Now, again, he's a stubborn man, but um, there are indications that he goes from a moon subperiod here. He's in a moon Rahu subperiod here, so he'll have a difficult time between now and at least July 10th in making people believe that he can handle anything. And after July 10th, he'll have this help from Jupiter, which should raise his profile, or it may convince him to essentially step out of the way. You know, Jupiter should give him more luck during this period. But Joe has what I would call a fairly typical politician combination, but it's rougher than a lot of politicians' charts I've seen. In that he's very competitive, but Saturn's aspecting his moon. Saturn's all over this chart. Now, it's all over Trump's chart, too, so don't think I'm picking on Joe. It's all over Trump's chart. It's heavily influencing Trump's chart, too. So Saturn is aspecting the moon. That will make him seem slower to the general public. And again, there are some people out there who do admire him, who do admire his record, and I'm not taking that away from them. But in September, and this Jupiter subperiod shows maybe he'll accede to the wishes of other people. Maybe he'll just decide to stay in there. But it's more likely, to me, he'll be advised to leave between the subperiod during this subperiod, maybe even efforts to force him out between July 23rd and August 7th. If he stays, September 15th to November 18th is the period of the general election. This is his first house lord. It's in the 12th house. I don't see really from this chart how that results in a win for him. He does have Rahu and Ketu Aradas in this house, which may help him out a little bit, but it doesn't look promising. Now, again, this has nothing to do with his personality. This has nothing to do with who's the better candidate or who's going to be better for the country. This is just based on astrological analyses. President Biden is a very political animal, at least from this chart. There's a lot of misrepresentation all around this chart, K2 moon. There's a lot of vocal uncertainties Saturn's aspecting Jupiter in his chart. He had a stammer. I have a stammer too, so I'm not knocking him. And I think one of the things you have to realize is that these things do make a difference in public perception. So he was just at the last stages of his Jupiter Mahadasha in a Rahu subperiod when he got elected. So Rahu gives great triumphs. And I think given the strength of his Jupiter, even though his Jupiter Mahadasha went back 16 years roughly to around 1998, I'm sorry, roughly to around 2008, that was when he was vice president, right? So this particular period, but again, it is a very afflicted chart. I'm not gonna, I can't soft pedal that. And to me, it would be somewhat miraculous if he were to win again. There is now one thing I will tell you, and this is going to get a lot of people upset from me. There is a very strong potential for cheating and deceit in this chart. Okay, that's political. That's one of the things that goes into politics. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So and also Scorpio rising is typically a hidden chart. You don't, so that chart doesn't play its hand out. But Saturn's aspecting his sun, Saturn's aspecting his moon. It's not a good combination, to be honest. He's in a Uranus return. Jupiter's in the same house as Saturn, which may help him out in the election in the fall. There will be an eclipse in these signs, which may help him out in the fall. But he's at risk. He's surrounded by enemies right now. Moon's in the sixth house. So even with the major support of his party, he'll have a tough time making a really good impression between now and September 15th. And that Mercury at 19 degrees, 32 minutes of Libra is it's in Swati Nakshatra. It can scatter him. It can just eliminate him. So again, it's neither about now. Again, the only positive thing he has going for him is that Jupiter transit, and also he has an exchange between the lords of the 12th and the first house. So he possibly could turn defeat into victory. But it will have to be through some kind of warfare. Also, he's in danger too, so I think, so I'm going to flip over to Trump's chart. I think people are looking at Trump as being in danger of being assassinated. I think Biden's at risk of a major health crisis over the next couple of months, especially in September. So let's look at Donald Trump's chart. I flipped over to that chart. All right, so Trump is, interestingly enough, he's in what's called a Kantaka Shani. So he's not in. So Saturn is not directly involved with his moon, but it is in a position of essentially, it's an embarrassing time, basically. That's really that's the most critical thing I can say about it, is aspecting his first house. So this is where all the court cases are coming from, this Kantaka Shani. And it's one of the smaller transits of, or one of the more intense Saturn transits. So he went through his 7.5 year period of Saturn when he was elected president. You know, he was right in the, he was basically right in the middle of it when he was elected president. And usually what happens in a sati is people get elevated to high positions. That's usually what happens. And or put it this way, if the potential for that shows up in the chart, they'll get given these great opportunities that call for a lot of responsibility. So also, if we look at Trump's chart, he has Mars in the first house, which is a really strong Raj Yoga for power. It is considered one of the best positions for power in a Vedic chart because you have what's called the fourth house ruler and the ninth house ruler in the first house. Saturn is in his second house, aspecting Jupiter in the chart. So again, these guys both have that Saturn-Jupiter aspect. Both of their Jupiters are ridiculously strong. Trump's is by being almost stationary direct, and obviously Biden's by being in Cancer. Now, the legal issues for Trump, he has these Rahu and Ketu Arudas in the sixth house. This will expose him to court cases. He's in a Saturn subperiod, so the court cases will continue without resolution really until around August 12th. Okay, so this is a sixth house matter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Saturn will aspect this Rahu Ketu. I think we're going to see attempts to accelerate the court cases. Saturn's in his 12th house. There are threats that he'll be thrown into prison. And he shifts signs, or he shifts over to Mercury subperiod around August 12th. Now, let me say something about Trump's chart in terms of misrepresentation or lying. It's not a political lie, not really, at least in terms of manipulation. However, he is a self-promoter. The Sun-Rahu combination gives strong potential for exaggeration. The good thing about Trump's chart for him, or the lucky thing about Trump's chart for him, is Jupiter's passing over his first house lord. So that's a little better than Biden's chart right now. The other thing is, when the debate occurred, Trump was in a Mercury subperiod. So that left him a little bit more cogent, controlled, disciplined. It didn't mean he didn't exaggerate things or misrepresent things. I think that's true of any candidate, and I've seen that happen. I watched presidential debates for years and years and years, and I think one of the things that people look at presidential debates for is how sure a person seems of themselves, how capable they seem. And this Saturn-Mercury subperiod would mean he would be smarter. Again, although he does say some stupid things, I'm going to say that flat out. And I think that Mercury in his chart helps him because it's in his 11th house and the Aruda, especially in competitions. He has to see it's the sixth Aruda, sixth house aspect of Aruda. And he has Mercury in his second house, and Aruda for Mercury in his second house. Now, K2 is moving through his second house right now. He's in a K2 subperiod. So the speech will come relatively easy to him. It's not something he has to really work at. K2 is like a natural gift. it gives instinctual strengths. So that's why he has this kind of advantage right now. The negatives are Saturn's aspecting his first house, Saturn's in the fourth house from the moon, which is like a reestablishing your credibility, basically. And I've been through those transits myself. I know what they feel like. It's like you're crawling your way back from basically either, or you're trying to reestablish yourself. The court cases, I can't say how the courts are going to determine. The fact that he was tried during a K2 subperiod, though, is not really indicative of the integrity of the court cases. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. K2 is also considered a planet connected or a graha connected with lying. But his subperiods, now the weakness for him doesn't come over the next month or so, because K2 will allow him to pretty much maintain his strength. K2 is a very strong planet. Okay. Although, like I said, it will certainly give him a lot of enemies. The problem in his chart is really the Jupiter-Venus subgrid. Jupiter and Venus don't really like each other, but if we look carefully, Venus is in the 11th house from Jupiter in this chart. So that gives him an edge on winning. Now, the other thing is, one thing I do want to say is there'll be an eclipse in this house, which is a death-inflicting house. So he'll be vulnerable to assassination attempts, I think, all through the remainder of the campaign. And there may even be, in October, there may even be what I would call a successful attempt on this. Not a successful, somebody may link and manage to, at the very least, attack him physically. But that doesn't necessarily mean he'll lose. And I think that this period, though, I don't think, so the Venus period it doesn't look like it's a slam dunk for him, though, either, to be honest with you. So I think that I give the odds to Trump in this race, just because of the general strength of his chart and the difficult transits that Biden is going through, and Biden's major planetary period sequence. But they're both not really strong. Neither one of them is really, really strong. But if I'm going to go out on a limb, K2's with the moon is his 12th house lord in the 4th house. That can mean a return to public service. The 12th house can mean a return to public service. It can also mean a loss. So we have to be careful about being jerkily positive about this. I say that based upon the United States chart, Trump is in a somewhat better position right now. But these things have a way of flipping themselves. Okay. So let's go to the birth chart. Let's go to the chart right now. So that's what I have to say about the two candidates. Okay. But again, Biden's being asked to step out of the campaign, to essentially leave the campaign. But again, that happened to Trump too, and Trump didn't leave. So We'll see what happens. But the Democrats generally tend to have better control. And um, Trump was very unusual as a candidate. Uh, his ego is both men's egos are really big. Okay, really, really big. But Trump, um, and they're both really, really stubborn. So we'll have to see what happens. So right now there's a lot of energy um, on the Democratic side to take him out. So we'll have to see what the polling says. The first initial poll showed up Biden by 1 point, um, and so we'll have to see what happens. Let's see what's going on right now in the world, as opposed to 4 to 5 months from now, or 4 months from now. We have the Lord of the first house is Venus. It's in the ninth house, so that's generally lucky. Venus really doesn't like the ninth house that much, to be honest with you, but it's still considered to be a lucky placement. Some gains for people right now. Mercury's in the 10th house. It just entered Cancer. So one of the things that struck me about this is that this is actually the United States media house, and so we had a lot of people in the media essentially saying Biden looked horrible. This was a couple of days ago when well, when the media were very weak. So, like I said, I'm trying to do this descriptively, not in a biased way. Right now, the Mercury's in its birth position in the chart. It'll go forward a little bit, and around mid-month, we'll start to feel the results of pending Mercury retrograde. And I think we'll probably see something um, happen uh, in terms of the media reversing their position or trying to hunker down a little bit and or else trying to create some kind of a new narrative around the election because media is not unbiased. It's just, you may have been taught it is, you may think it is, but uh, it's not. The Mercury Rahu conjunction in the US chart essentially makes it a commercial entity, and also it does try to control events. So it doesn't report on them, it actually tries to control events. So, and that's not just paranoia, that's essentially American history. Going all the way back to the Maine, going all the way back to John Adams' presidency. This is not a new phenomenon. So let's go over here and let's look at, so that is godly good. Venus will be in a little bit better shape when it's in Cancer, but it likes being in Gemini. It enjoys being in Gemini. And a certain amount of truth will come out when Venus is in Gemini as well, especially from the reporting sector. Mercury in Cancer is a little bit more dicey, and there'll be more emotional calls. The moon is with Rahu right now. That makes the public a little bit worried or concerned about uh, uh, competitions or elections. This is true around the world. There are a series of elections happening in Europe right now, which are very, very challenging for the current leaders. Saturn is aspecting Mars. We want everything to be perfect. Nobody wants to take chances when Saturn aspects Mars. It's a difficult time. And Rahu Moon, this can mean also some potential for catastrophes like we've seen over the past few weeks, or the past week or so. California had an earthquake, Turkey had an earthquake, and um, again, although it's interesting to look at Pisces, which is a water sign for earthquakes. Um, it's it's been my experience that if K2's in an earth sign, or if an earth sign is indirectly affected by Rahu or the moon, then we tend to get earthquakes, we tend to get volcanoes, we tend to get disasters. Saturn's in the fifth house. Saturn just turned retrograde. He's going to be moving backward through the chart for the next 4 months or so. And so essentially, by early next year, Saturn will be in the next sign. Saturn will be in Pisces by around March. And that's when I said last week we're going to see the April 15th, we'll see the Saturn Rahu conjunction, which for me is more important than the Saturn Jupiter conjunctions, to be honest with you. Saturn and Jupiter are significant, but Saturn Rahu, and Saturn K2 are more problematic. The other thing is, but all three will give shifts in perception. And if we look at this chart, so K2 is in the 12th house. So again, still going to be expensive. Inflation has moderated somewhat, but Saturn aspecting Mars still means there's limited access to mineral resources. So those kinds of problems. Immigration has slowed down a little bit. The after effects of immigration are really hitting a lot of countries right now. UK and Ireland are both going to be experiencing massive inflows of refugees, and as other countries across Europe have. So I think one of the things is that this entire year looks like a lot of disruption to seated politicians, or else significant blowback against policies that nobody seems to like. And Europe is hurting much more than, at least economically, than we are. So we have Mars. Saturn, Mars also causes earth changes or earthquakes. Sun, Venus conjunctions, less influence from the government. The government tends to get a little bit more spiky, a little bit less. And spiky is not the right word, a little bit less controlling, just because Venus is really more in favor of the truth. So we saw a few court cases come down over the past week that had more to do with finding unconventional people or disruptive people improperly charged. And so Venus tends to favor non-traditionalists. So a lot of court cases are essentially dying. Now, the thing of it is, we do have a Mars-Mercury aspect in this chart, and I think that particular combination will still be an influence over the next couple of months. So again, be prepared for some whoppers of lies in August, okay? In August and September, okay? So this is true not only of not on one side or other, and legal issues surrounding former President Trump have not gone away. Those are not gone away. And as a matter of fact, you'll still see some economic shortages popping up as well over the next few months. In terms of individual charts, let's look at the individual charts. So that's essentially what I'm saying for this week. I'm I'm thinking that France will see a shift in the electoral stakes, and I don't know whether or not Macron can hold on to power. I don't think he can. Okay, so that's just one country I'm focused on right now. But a lot of countries around the world will experience changes. So we already saw a shift in Argentina. Um, we already saw shifts in uh, the European Union's parliament. Uh, we're seeing surprisingly strong showing from Nigel Farage in England. So this is essentially Saturn trying to shake things up. Saturn in Aquarius actually is really interesting because it is a combination for political or economic reform. Now, again, those reforms aren't going to please everybody. Some people are going to look at them as being damaging or dangerous. I understand that. But essential, but they're essential for some kind of progress to be made or some kind of change to be initiated. All right, so let's look over here. Aries. Aries has Mars in the first house, Jupiter in the second. Good for financial growth for Aries. Uh, there's a certain amount of graciousness or goodwill because Sun and Venus are in the third house. And Mercury's in the fourth house, so this gives increased communication patterns for this particular um, sign. It will give Kate, who's in the sixth house, ability to overcome enemies, but enemies will be sneaky. And if we go over here to Saturn in the 11th house, there will be some financial gains which will all of a sudden be taken back. And Rahu and Moon in the 12th house, some problems with home life and essentially what I would call unnecessary expenses. For Taurus, Taurus has Jupiter in the first, which is generally considered to be a good placement. The second house Lord is in the third, so that'll give increased gains or financial improvement. Some expenses connected with wife, though, and relationship partner. Relationship partner will be more costly. Saturn's in the 10th house. A lot of work will have to be redone until it's perfect. And Moon and Rahu are in the 11th house. This is not good for financial gains through friends. For Gemini, Gemini has Sun and Venus in the first house. That's not really a Raj Yoga, but it does give this sign a great deal of courage, a great deal of strength. And Mercury in the second house, you have with the Lord of, so again, a lot of focus on career, some career frustration, some frustration with the amount of money being made. But this sign will focus a great deal on career and a great deal on speaking and communications this coming week. Ketu's in the fourth house. Rahu's in the ninth house. Some problems with the knees and the legs. Saturn's over here. That causes that. And Mars is over here. So again, doctors will be, so that this sign will have a lot of problems connected with either foreign countries or with parts of the body connected below the waist, especially in the legs, knees, calves, and ankles and feet. Its overall health is good. those problems are probably going to continue for, I would say, at least another couple of months, uh, until Mars goes to the first house, and you'll see some general improvement in health. K2, still not a lot of luck in relationship. Luck moves slowly for the sign. Moon is in the 10th house. So again, there will be some career recognition for Gemini. For Cancer, Mercury's in the first house. It's the 12th lord in the first house. So again, we have a lot of expenses in this chart, a lot of costs in this chart. And it's undesired items. K2's in the third. The fourth house planet, so there'll be a lot of expenses connected with home life. This is for Cancer. And also, again, some leg problems or some problems with headaches. The other thing is you have Saturn in the 8th house, which is, again, sort of like a reformative period for a person. And Moon is actually in the 9th house, so this actually does give a little bit more luck to this sign than normal, and some more financial gains than normal over the next few months. For Leo, Leo has Mercury in the 12th house, so everything it earns, it spends rather quickly, or else it saves wisely. You know, that Mercury in the 12th unafflicted can give that kind of a combination. And the retrograde will probably increase its financial prosperity through the next month. The retrograde of Mercury will probably increase its financial prosperity through the next month. K2 is in the 2nd house. It makes it easy for the sign to talk, easier for it to communicate. Words will flow in an almost improvisational fashion. The 3rd house lord is ruled by the sun. Sun's in the 12th house. So a lot of this person's energy will be on spending money. Mars is the 4th lord, and the lord of the 4th is in the 9th. So it's generally a lucky period for this particular sign for Leo. Saturn's in the 7th house. It creates a Raj Yoga for the chart. Essentially, this a rulership combination. And Moon and Rahu are in the 8th house, but there's still some anxiety about being confined or being or worried. Mars is in the 9th house, as we said before. Jupiter's in the 10th. Sun and Venus are in the 11th house. So generally good for gains for the sign. For Virgo has K2 in the 1st house. The lord of the 2nd is in the 10th house of career. The lord of the 1st house is in the 11th house of gains. So actually not a bad month for gains for the sign, although K2 can make the sign a little bit lazy at times. Saturn is in the 6th house. So again, we have some legal matters or some competition. Moon is in the same sign with Rahu, so there may be some feeling that relationship life isn't satisfying. That'll probably be brought to a head over the next couple of days. Mars is in the 8th. This sign can feel a little bit victimized or a little bit taken advantage of in relationships. And Jupiter's Sun and Venus and Mercury are in 3 good houses for financial growth. So that's actually good for Virgo. For Libra, Libra has Mars in the 7th house aspected by Saturn. So that does mean there'll be potential relationship partners, but some frustration with the existing relationship partners, or maybe just a lot more pressure from relationship partners than normal, and also more fights. The other thing we want to look at here is the Rahu Moon, Saturn's in the fifth house. So essentially anything this sign puts its mind to, it can do. It will just have to be willing to work very, very hard. Rahu and Moon in the sixth, there'll be some struggles in career, but those will be overcome relatively shortly, within about a day or so. And let me just see now. Career life actually looks fairly good for Libra, although it will be a lot of work. Jupiter's in the eighth house. Sudden income gains are predicted from this placement. The Lord of the 11th and the first house are combined in the ninth house as what's called a wealth-producing combination, or a Dana Yoga. So money should be fairly good for this sign, and career should be good. All right. So the only downside here is K2's in the 12th, and there may be some problems with people in other countries. Scorpio has Mars in the sixth house. It's a bit of a struggle for the sign, at least up until about 3 weeks from now. And even then, I still think it's going to be a struggle. But basically, this sign's energy levels are low, and Saturn in the fourth house, there is a decline in general status for people with this combination. But again, it'll cause some anxiety. Maybe it'll boil over by Monday or so. And with the Moon Mars conjunction, you'll see more energy. Jupiter's in the seventh house. That's actually good for relationship partners or potential relationship life. Sun and Venus are in the eighth house, and Mercury's in the ninth. So that gives a combination of what's called a Viprit Raj Yoga. We have an exchange of lords between, not really an exchange of lords. Let me just rephrase that. Yeah, it's an indirect Viprit Raj Yoga for Scorpio, because the moon's in the sixth house. The lord of the sixth house is, the lord of the sixth is in the eighth. I'm sorry, is in the seventh, and the lord of the seventh is in the eighth, and the lord of the eighth is in the ninth. So even though there may be a fear of losing status or imprisonment or not being able to do what you want to do, a lot of these phenomena are temporary. But this does indicate it's a time to essentially lean back and not create any new controversy or any new problems, okay, for yourself. So it's sort of like stay in the shadow a little bit. Sagittarius has Jupiter in the sixth house, so this can give more enemies to the sign, people who mean well, but they'll tend to hold you back. Saturn aspects Mars in this chart again, and Moon is in the fourth house, so this gives some uncertainty or worry. This is the rising sign of the United States chart. And Venus is in the seventh house, which is actually considered pretty good for this sign. And so is Sun. So it's the ninth lord of luck, and the Sun, lord of gains in the seventh house. So gain of relationship partners or gain of business partners is indicated. Finally, Saturn is aspecting Mars, as we said before, and Moon is going to give some temporary worry. All right. So Capricorn has Saturn in the second house. I return to a focus on money, more financial conservatism. Moon is in the third house with Rahu. This will give some worry or some anxiety to wife or relationship partner. Mars is aspect in the seventh, so again, more potential for fights relationship wise. And finally, we go over here to this cluster of planets in these houses. Mars is in its own sign in the fourth house, so they'll be focused on building. Jupiter is in Taurus, and so that's the fifth house. That's the third house, Lord. In the fifth house will make this um, rising sign or sun sign very ambitious. Sun, Venus are in the sixth house. It can give some court displays. And Mercury's in the seventh house. Good for relationships and business, not so good for relationships with people. For Aquarius, so that's for Capricorn. For Aquarius, Saturn's in the first house, makes this a leadership planet. Moon and Rahu are in the second house. There'll be a lot of anxiety about money, about financial status. Mars is in the third house. A lot of more courage for the sign. Jupiter's in the fourth. And that makes this sign, there's an exchange of lords between the fourth and no, there's not an exchange of lords, but there is a combination between the second, third, fourth, a combination between the second house lord, the fourth house lord, the fifth house lord, and the sixth house lord, which essentially indicates there'll be some arguments or discussions over property or re-strategizing as to how to make more money. And Kate, who's in the eighth house, this can make this sign feel like it's at danger at risk of being trapped. Finally, for Pisces, Moon and Rahu are in the first house. A lot of attention, a lot of focus on luck and finances. Mars and Venus are in the second house. Mars is in the second house, and Jupiter's in the third. Sun and Venus are in the fourth, and Mercury's in the fifth. So all these houses are lined up pretty well for some financial success for Pisces. Although there is a tendency to spend it on necessities like car repairs, things like that, because of Saturn being in the 12th house. K2's in the seventh house. Again, some boredom is to be predicted with relationship partners or difficulties. And finally, we get back to that Saturn, some expenses. So, in general, not really the best week, but not really the worst week either. Now, let's go to the astro mapping chart and see where we have concentrations. So we're gonna all right, I'll close that down. All right, I see. All right, so we have Jupiter and a Saturn line going over the Aleutians and the Hawaiian Islands. That tends to represent, to me at least, economic constraints in those areas. That's pretty safe. Some governmental scandals in California, Oregon, and Washington. There was an earthquake. There's a lot of suspected volcanic or earthquake activity. Around here, there actually is a scandal with the mayor of Oakland right now. The details aren't specific, but that Rahu line running through that particular location in California is pretty dead on. And it looks like, because Venus is so close to Rahu, it looks like it's money related. So it looks like it's connected with some kind of allegations of financial fraud. Um, we'll see what it's really about. We haven't heard what it's about. Um, and the mayor is insisting she will not resign. You know, she will not be forced out of office. Uh, Moon and Mercury are intersecting over. This is interesting over Nebraska. No, that's not Nebraska. I'm sorry, that's Wyoming and down into New Mexico and being between New Mexico and Arizona. Um, let's see now. So that'll give a lot of attention to those particular signs. And I need to look down for a second. 1 second, I'm sorry. My apologies. All right. So this part of the country will be in the news a lot. Um, there is a Rahu line running up through central Canada. There's a Mars line running up through to parts of Mexico and into Georgia and all the way up through North and South Carolina and West Virginia and into Pennsylvania and Western New York State up into Canada. Now, this could mean arguments or fights or danger of fire in those parts of the world. And it's also hitting, I believe that's Guatemala. I'm not 100% sure. I believe that's Guatemala. And if we go here, we have a Jupiter line running up through uh, Venezuela, Colombia, and through Peru. In Ecuador, there was a really bad situation developing in Ecuador. Oh, Julian Assange just got released, so that's where the Jupiter line is close to, or he just got released for pleading guilty to a crime. But basically, or by pleading guilty to a crime, and there is some potential for some negotiations over land in uh, Guyana. There's a Saturn line running through parts of Guyana down into Brazil, down into Uruguay, Paraguay, um, and parts of Argentina are being affected uh, by financial strife. We have a Sun Venus line running through Argentina, Lower Argentina, or more southerly Argentina. And actually, those lines are converging in the UK, especially around Scotland, it looks like, and also in um, Wales, Liverpool, and parts of France, and down through Spain and into Morocco. And there's a Mercury line. We'll be hearing a lot more about France and Germany and Finland over the next few weeks. We have, I need to move this over just a second. We have a Jupiter line running straight down Sweden, down into Belgium, down into Greece. So this tends to mean, and also down to Algeria and Sudan and down into Mozambique and down into South Africa. All right, not sure that's Mozambique or Zimbabwe. I'm sorry. And that particular line actually indicates changes of governments or governmental reform. Saturn's going through Western Turkey and through the Ukraine, and we have a Moon Rahu combination, so there will be some panic on the Ukrainian front over here. Um, the other thing is we have a Venus line running through close to Moscow, and that doesn't look good. Essentially, there'll be a certain amount of panic in that part of the world, like right in these areas right here, and also a Mars line running through India and Pakistan and Afghanistan, which can indicate, and also Iran, which can indicate more violence in those countries. And let's see now, we also have Moon running through Iran, which can indicate change of government. Um, let's see now. So we have that Jupiter line running through there, Saturn line running through here. Definitely some problems in the Middle East. I got a little bit snoozy myself just then. I apologize. And there's a Rahu line going through close to the United Arab Emirates and Iran. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some kind of military conflict because the elections were close and more reform-minded. The reform candidate seems to be gaining ground. For Jupiter, there's a Jupiter line running through Vietnam and down into Australia and also into China. And so that Mars Jupiter line doesn't really look good to me for keeping war at bay. There's a Sun line over here, though, and a Saturn line, so that could restrict imports from Korea and China. And we also have Venus and Mercury lines running right through Japan, which are generally good. These are generally positive lines. There's a Moon and a Rahu line though running through Japan and also through Australia and through New Guinea. And I think we're seeing some panic in that part of the world, also in the Philippines, and also down into our friends. There's a Sun line in New Zealand. New Zealand actually has been through kind of a messy transition lately. And I think we're seeing that maybe even arguments or demonstrations in New Zealand over the next few weeks. So that's about it for this week. I look forward to seeing you all next week. If you want to contact me for reading again, 508-525-0001, or else you can email me at GaryGomesG@gmail.com. I love you all. The subscriber base is going up thanks to your good work. And it really does help. And if you comment, it helps. I've been happy to exchange thoughts with people who commented over the past few weeks. So let's keep it up. We're going to try to aim for a live podcast at some point in the near future. Maybe not be for a few weeks, but I'm going to try to aim for one of those and try to get you engaged. If you'd like to come on the show, please let me know. I'm happy to have you, but only to talk about astrology. We're not going to talk about anything else. Okay? So forgive me for putting the political flavor in this week, but I always do it. You know, I always do it because I like to understand what's happening in the world economically and politically through astrology. And I think we live in interesting astrological times. I'm really curious to see what happens when that comet appears in October. I'm really curious to see what the outcomes of of the next eclipse, October 2nd, the next solar eclipse, October 2nd, which will actually be focused on this part of the world, to be truthful. Well, will be. Okay, so see you next week. I love you all. Thanks so much for watching and have a great week. Happy 4th to those of you who celebrate in the United States and any of you who celebrated abroad. Okay, bye everyone.